fear is on, whether it's a 7-second, 7-minute, 7-day delay. I feel like fear kicks in, but on a delay. And so I try to train my clients to look for that sequence. If the guidance came first and then the fear, I think that's very telling. So if that's the case,
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of the podcast today. And boy, are you in for a treat because we have literally America's life coach. We're going to find out what that means. How do you become America's life coach? And we're going to get some life coaching, all of us, ourselves. Everybody, welcome in Stephen Lovegrove to the podcast.
good to be here. I'm learning right now. We got to do 3 people's coaching today. That's a lot.
That's right.
Well, I'm up for it,
And all of
Shawn.
our
Heck
listeners.
yes.
Don't forget about the audience.
Yeah, really,
The audience
coach
is
them.
most important to me. Is this where they are?
Yeah.
You are the one I'm here for. Love these 3. Here for you.
Let's dive in. How do you become America's life coach? Everybody, if you see you on the internet, you've been on many television shows. Everybody calls you America's life coach.
I call him my coach, but I don't know.
Well, you're a part of America.
Yes,
How do
he
you
is.
become America's
Miss
life
America.
coach?
Well, it's an interesting story because it wasn't like one day we just chose it as a branding decision and slapped it on. The words came to me one day, really in a meditation, and I was like, this is probably in, I want to say late 2015, and I thought, I'm not doing anything with that. Like, who says that? Who does that? And the words stuck with me for 8.5 months. And I like telling this story because I
It's
think
like you were
that,
pregnant, bro.
I've never thought about that length of time. And then I had a little preemie baby, I guess. But I
Little
like,
life coach, baby.
right. It was my business baby, my branding baby.
Yeah.
But I like telling that part of the story because if you really have an intuitive idea that's for you, it shouldn't change every 3 days. It should confirm over time. And that's what it was for me. And so 8.5 months, as David has never seen it the same way again, my pregnancy length later, I was like, I think I'm supposed to use these words. So I remember the first day we put out a post, and I just snuck it in as a hashtag. That's how I tiptoed in. But from the beginning, I didn't view it as we just claim it and it's done. I almost viewed it as, this is who I want to be. This is who I'm called to be. And so this is something I have to live into. And I think it actually made me mature more quickly and grow and expand more quickly because it made me look at my business through a different lens. And I think identity is the deepest level of the work. It gave me an identity to say every day, who am I going to wake up and be? How am I going to show up? How would this version of me show up? And that's stuck from there.
We should all just become America's whatever it is that you do. America's chiropractor, America's...
Funniest videos.
Well, you have that too. Yeah, step into it. But I love that. Step into who you're being called to be.
And being able to tap into that identity is so vitally important, like you said, for who we are and what we do.
Well, and I also think like it's an important piece of the story to me that it came from inner guidance. And I believe every single person listening or watching, there are ideas for you that infinite loving intelligence knows how to get to you. And your job is to listen and receive those. And only you can do that. Like there's certain things in life you can't delegate. Sadly, you can't delegate working out and have somebody else do it for you.
Very sadly,
Can
very
you delegate
sadly.
worry? Because that'd be wonderful,
Oh.
right? Get someone to worry for you.
Well, I would say you can delegate that to God.
Nice. Okay.
Because
good.
God says you can take the cares that you're carrying and give them over to God. So actually, I think
Yes.
you can delegate worry to God, but you can't delegate hearing the guidance for yourself. And a lot of people, listen, I'm all for reading, learning. I listen to so many podcasts, all these things, but in the midst of doing all of that, I think it is so vital. There are ideas just for you. There's direction just for you. Often I think there's not warnings in like a scary way, but just there might be messages of, hey, don't go into business with that person. Don't partner with that, not that thing. And only you can get that guidance for yourself.
But I think this is important because a lot of people don't really know what their inner voice is. They don't know how to recognize it. And there's a lot of like worry or concern, like, is that my intuition telling me something? Or is that my educated thought process trying to talk me out of something? So how do you know that that is your inner voice, your inner guidance speaking to you in certain moments?
So, couple things that I think are helpful here. One is I think it takes practice. And I like to encourage people, if you're trying to work with your intuition, you're trying to practice listening on a deep level, which, by the way, my coach talked to me about for years and I didn't get it. And she would be like, are you really listening? And I was like, to you? And she was like, no. Like, on the
To you,
deepest
to
level, are you
yourself.
listening? And I'm like, I'm open.
Yeah.
And she's like, you're not listening. It took me years to understand. But it takes practice. And so one thing I challenge people to do is have a journal, have a notebook, have a document where if you feel like you get a message, you write it down. And you don't have to be weird about it. You don't have to go on social media. I got a download today. Fun fact about me, I hate the word download because it's so overused. Everything's not a download. You can have a brilliant idea. It wasn't all a download. But I think there's something that happens when you start to write these down, because when I started doing this, I would look back over time and I would realize there was a consistency here and the messages were leading me in the right direction and they added up, and it wasn't a bunch of nonsense. It wasn't moving me 9 different ways. It all kind of added up. So I think practice helps a lot. I think if you write it down and get it out in front of you, that kind of helps to assess it. But I also, I love the question, whose voice is that? And I think it's really helpful to, if you're wondering, like, what is this thought, where it's coming from? Look at the thought and ask, does this feel familiar? Now, if it sounds like your mom or dad, probably not divine guidance, probably your mom or dad's voice. It might sound like I have clients who maybe an old mentor used to have a really hardball style. So they have this voice that even comes from an old mentor. Once you recognize, oh, that's that mentor's voice, that's my ex's voice, that's that teacher's voice. Well, once you recognize that, okay, that probably belongs somewhere else. I think that the divine guidance, intuition voice sounds a lot like your voice with a thought you've never had before. And that's a personal answer for how it feels to me. But for me, it often feels like it is coming in my voice in my head, but it's a thought I've never had before, and I don't know where it came from.
This is an interesting conversation to me because I'm in the midst of reconciling 3 different intelligences. 1, logic, 2, intuition, and 3, inspiration. And so when you talk about these voices, they can obviously be one of logic. 2 could be, which is intelligence of that form. 2, it could be an intuition, but of someone else's voice, like a mentor, a teacher, your parents especially, or even, and I know a lot of people may or may not believe this, but past lives and other things that can genetically and energetically influence the voices that we listen to or the meaning that we give it. But that divine voice, we have to capture all of it. And what I thought was so interesting is I have this capture philosophy of if something resonates with me in any one of the 3 levels, intelligent wise, wow, that's really interesting, or intuitively, like, whoa, or even inspirationally, then I capture it and I use those as clues to identify patterns, which would be, in your words, the ability to say whose voice is that pattern, because all of a sudden you put the clues together and you're like, oh, that's my dad, or my fear of becoming my dad, or whatever is there. The one element that I really found interesting in the higher intelligence is in infinite intelligence comes infinite time. But yet we want to utilize our information in the man-made construct of time. This is your America's Life Coach. I want it for this lifetime. How do we help people, or I should say, how do you help me understand I'm capturing the information, but being able to utilize it with constructive time, not divine time? Because I always try to put this more judgment when I'm intuitive in nature, inspired, I have to remind myself, don't bet on the hard 8 just because you have an intuitive thought that hard 8 is coming on the craps table. It's not going to be the next roll. It just has elevated my awareness that hard 8's important for some reason.
Well, and I think an important piece of this is I think we expand through exposure, but most of the time, exposure is for your future. It's not for your right now. And I've been telling this story recently because I had a client who was in a process and she is led to this incredible possibility, but it's not the right one for her. And we have this very real conversation. And she said, I'm finding myself honestly angry. And I know this isn't rational, but she said, I'm finding myself feeling like, why did God even let me see this? Because it didn't work out. And I said, well, be careful shutting that down, because what I would say that you received is exposure. But a lot of the things we see, it may be a preview of your future, and it may not be right for this moment. And I said, I try to be open to all exposure, because it may not be, the next chapter of my life, but I want to receive all those insights, all those things. So I think part of what I believe is infinite loving intelligence. And I use the word God. People are invited to hear this in whatever language you want. But I think of it as God being outside of and inside of all space and time, has an eternal perspective, which is why God is never rushed. God is never stressed. God never has an urgency, because God is outside of time, looking at your life like David's story unfolded perfectly. Lacey's story unfolded perfectly. Shawn's story unfolded perfectly. So God sees the whole. God can move in the movie almost. Like the movie is beautiful from an eternal perspective. The beautiful thing, though, is the only place that we can access any of the guidance is the present moment. So that's the intersection we want to look for, with the awareness. I might get something in the present moment that I'm seeing right now, I'm hearing right now, I'm sensing right now. And I love that you use the word clues, because sometimes I think we need to write it down. I think about this all the time when I teach. Everything I speak to, you may not be going through right now. That's okay. But please get it in your consciousness for later, because then you're going to have the guidance you need in a later moment. So I want to be very willing. Show me the things I'm going to need in 3 years, and I can handle the exposure, and show me something that feels way too good to be true in this moment, but help me start to expand to it. So when I get there 7 years down the road, I've been prepared.
Let's talk about, so that's great in the theoretical or philosophical and the high level thinking realm. Now let's come to the more pragmatic. There's a lot of difficulty in execution of these constructs, these downloads, the wisdom, guidance that
This
you
is my
might
little
get.
Tabasco in a wound, friends.
Right.
But now that I've received it, I have to execute. And that's where it gets hard, because oftentimes I can feel like, well, I'm being led to leave a relationship, leave a job, do something hard. And then I begin that process of the conscious convincing myself that that's not the best idea. Give us some guidance for all of us on how we can be better executors of that divine messaging.
Well, so notice in what you just said, the guidance comes first, then the fear comes on a delay. So we're in a stadium right now. You know how live broadcasting, certainly after the Super Bowl 20 something years ago, we have a 7-second delay.
Right.
Well, fear is on whether it's a 7-second, 7-minute, 7-day delay. I feel like fear kicks in, but on a delay. And so I try to train my clients to look for that sequence. So did you know what was the right decision to do, and you felt that? Then the fear kicked in. Now, usually by the time we're having the conversation, they're trying to reconcile. Here's all the things that I'm negotiating with myself. Here's all the things I'm worried about. Here's all the ways it could go wrong. But I always point out, if the guidance came first and then the fear, I think that's very telling. So if that's the case, what we want to do is, how can I honor the guidance because it spoke first and it's not leading me astray? And then how can I work through the fear, but stay committed to it still is the right decision?
Can I interject?
Yeah,
'Cause I know you get coached all the time by.
I do. I see you. It's okay.
This one's key. So one of the strategies that I utilize because of that delay is that I try to make my identification or processing of fear a long journey. But in order to be pragmatic and practical in my life, I have an instant and obvious thing that exists, which is my reaction to fear. So if I'm offended or pissed off, resentful, guilty, worried, anxious, frustrated, these are all reactions to fear. I know that. I understand that. So what would you tell me as my coach to say, look, my strategy is this. I'm not so worried about the fact that I was molested as a 9-year-old. I know that's creating a whole bunch of effed up shit in my life, but I'm going to therapy and it's going to take me a while to get through that. But in order to get through my day in a more productive way and a better life, all I'm dealing with is every time I react to fear, to practice identifying it and shorten the amount of time it takes me to get back to center. Is that, number one, a healthy or realistic way of dealing with fear?
Yeah, well, let me say two things. One, I had a client ask me recently, Stefan, this is the question they came to the call with. How do I remain in a high vibe state always? And I said, I hate to be this person with the redirect, but I said, I'm going to give you a reframe that's the wrong goal, wrong question, wrong target. What I would rather you focus on, if you're going to see it that way, is how good can I get at resetting? Yeah. How fast can
strategy.
I? Right. Mm-hmm. So I love that because that's a much better focus than this perfectionistic, I don't want to have any reactions. The other thing I would say is when it comes to the reactions, have the reaction because you're human, but try to put up a boundary that you don't create from the reaction. This is
Great
where,
point.
you know, I'll share a vulnerable example. I had a moment of conflict with a friend at one point last year. We're at an event. There was a misunderstanding. It was all not what we thought it was, but in the moment, both of us felt very feelings hurt. And I'm not even the one that did the right thing in this story. My friend is. My friend said, you know what? I think it would help us both to take a walk. I love you. Let's reconvene in 5 minutes. We took a walk. Just that moment of, we're both very triggered. We can feel that feelings are hurt right now. I'm not going to judge myself for that. I'm not going to punish myself for that reaction. But if we have the conversation out of this reaction, that's not the best version of myself. And, you know, I actually bring up this study that I just have found fascinating. They did a study on trauma survivors and people who go through traumatic experiences, PTSD experiences. And they found if you try to make somebody resolve it and like come up with the meaning and heal it for themselves too soon, it actually causes more trauma. And the funny thing the study found is when they assigned them a simple task, like we're going to give you a phone to play Tetris on. Don't worry about thinking about this at all. We just want you to breathe, play Tetris. That brought them to a place of peace. And then they were able to return to the event later, not from the reactive zone. So I think that's really the key is you're never going to cut out the reactions. I know that TikTok kids love to joke about ashwagandha. I guess that can maybe reduce them for some, but you're never going to cut out the reactions. Try not to fire or hire from a reaction. Try not to cut off a friend from a reaction. Try not to fight with somebody. These kind of boundaries, I think, make a big difference.
Yep.
Love it.
Oh, it's me. All right. I want to know, first of all, I love this transition. So either from a fan perspective or watching your evolution, this transition that you really moved into this embracing of the spiritual side of Stefan, and not only embracing, but sharing that with the world. Talk to us about that, because I think that not everybody will necessarily resonate on the spiritual side, but we have things that we stand for. We have things that are important to us that we don't share with the world. Explain to us that
and
evolution.
The courage to step into your actual identity,
yes.
you know, and who you are. I've seen you do that too. And that's very powerful. Yeah.
Well, I think it was two big things shifted it for me. One is I had a couple of people, mentors, voices, teachers that I had learned from afar early on in my journey, especially pass away within a short span of time. And I will never forget one day, this person had just passed like 5 days before, and I'm on YouTube. I love my YouTube. I'm on YouTube and I open it, and here is a piece of content and a teaching from this person. And it's showing up on my YouTube. And this is an obvious concept. It's not like I didn't understand somebody's work outliving them. But in just a visceral way, I look at this video and I'm like, that is legacy and why that matters, because this person's consciousness is saving somebody's life today, saving somebody's marriage today, bringing someone purpose and hope. and they're not even here anymore in the human experience, and their consciousness is still making an impact. And so that was a big piece for me, because for the longest time, I only prioritized one-on-one. I still love my one-on-one work, but for the longest time, I was like, I don't need to do anything else. I coach leaders. I have a ripple effect. I'm thrilled with my one-on-one. The legacy thing really got me thinking. And so I would encourage anyone to think about, what do you want to leave behind? These kind of big picture questions, I think you'll create on a different level when you do ask them. The other thing was, I had a conversation with my coach, and she said, are you aware that it's almost like you use business as a gateway to personal development, and then personal development, if we can take it a step further, as a gateway to spirituality? Because that's the core stuff that you love the most. And, it's a part of my story. Growing up in a hyper strict religious environment caused me a lot of pain. Reconnecting spiritually for myself as an adult was a very big part of my journey. So it makes sense that it would be a big thing. My coach said, are you aware? Because this has always felt apparent to me. And so when I realized that, I was like, well, I wasn't aware. I didn't see it that way. So thank God it was brought to my attention. But now I was like, if this is the core of what I love, am I going to own it, or do I want it to be behind two things? And that's what I think a lot of people do, is the thing that really is their zone of genius. Right. They don't really want to go all in on that. So it's buried in the back. It's like maybe 5% of the time, maybe in my deep inner circle, maybe eventually I'll get to that. And I just made a choice. We're going to take this part of the work. I want it to be available for, in a legacy sense, and for people who will never get to work with me one-on-one. And if this is really the core, and the amount of clients, I sat with a client at dinner a couple months back, and she said, obviously, Stefan. She said, I always processed you as the spiritual guy. She's like, I cannot believe this was such a groundbreaking insight to you. So that was really what it was about. And I think when your zone of genius becomes more and more central to your life, there is so much fulfillment there, because your zone, I love the music that's going right now, actually. We decided to ride with it, and now I'm like, is this rave church? I'm working with it. But I feel like if your zone of genius by definition is the thing you would do, even if you never got paid, just naturally because you love it, of course, the more you fill your life with that, the better of a life you have.
I love that.
Well, I'm going to switch it then. America's spiritual coach.
There you go.
It'll just come to you. Boom. America's spiritual coach. That could be the next evolution. We conclude every episode with life's lessons. What did you learn today from Stefan?
Well, I've been blessed to be exposed to or aware of Stefan, and it's really nice to get, even with the background music, a deeper understanding of where his voice comes from. And the word genius is my takeaway, or the lesson. And I always say that our genius is the expression of God. It's the closest we come to our true self, our true identity. And as America's life coach, or as an extraordinary coach of any kind, it's to be able to not only be aware of who we are, but help bring that out
of others.
In other people, which is a duplicative genius of Stefan. And that's my takeaway, is to find your genius, find someone who sits in a situation that can bring out your genius as well. And I love that reconciliation of genius today. And my elevated respect and love for you has grown in a few minutes here on this podcast. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
He's a genius.
Stefan Lovegrove. I know we already know Lacey loves Stefan. Now Dave loves Stefan. I love Stefan. You love Stefan.
Yeah, but me and Lacey actually will show him.
Yes, we'll show him all the love.
You can hit a session and teach him.
He knows. I don't. He knows the real me.
I love Shawn. Yeah. I'm saying on record.
I love Shawn too.
He
just doesn't show his love for us. He hides it behind that beautiful smile.
No, that is the love.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, we gotta go. Hope you enjoyed the rave background music. Just perfect timing. We wrapped it up right here with Stefan Lovegrove, America's life coach. We'll see you next time.